Hey everybody, Ketwalski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Star Trek Discovery Discussions videos. So today we are going to do my best and worst list of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. This video kind of started out with my top 5, bottom 5, and then as I continued to work it, it kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it started trying to cover more topics, because originally it was going to be top 5, bottom 5 episodes, and then I wanted to cover certain scenes, then I wanted to cover certain different performances, and then it just kind of continued to expand, and ultimately the top 5, bottom 5 thing just didn't really fit anymore. So instead, I'm just going to do several different categories and do my best and worst within those categories. Another thing I want to go ahead and note before I even get into this video is the fact that these are all my opinions. These are not facts. These are not anything hardline. These are just my opinions, my personal thoughts. You can have different opinions about the things that I say in this video. You could have your own best and worst. It doesn't make anybody wrong or right. I'm just sharing my opinions with all of you so that you guys can share all of your opinions with me and we can get this conversation started. So let's go ahead and get into what the topics we're going to be covering. Okay, so the categories include episode, scene, new character, returning character, and action sequence. I'm going to do a best and worst of all of them with a quick little description as to why I chose that. So let's go ahead and start off with episodes. So to me, the best episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2 is If Memory Serves. This was kind of neck and neck for me with New Eden, which, was earlier in the season. But for me, this particular Discovery episode just really nailed all of the central points that make a good Star Trek episode. It had a great formula. It had great characters. It involved, visiting alien worlds. It involved away missions. It involved family. It involved tightness and closeness. And then really, ultimately, this was the shining episode for Anson Mount, where this was, again, in case you guys don't remember, this is the one where, Spock and Burnham visit Talos 4 to get his mind cleared up. And then we have the kind of, connections back to the original Star Trek pilot, which did not air, but then was recut later on into the menagerie, all that other stuff like that. But for me, If Memory Serves was the best episode of this season. It didn't include too much action overall, but the character stuff really just nailed it home for me. I really, really love this episode. Again, New Eden was a really great episode as well because it also captured a lot of the essence of what a Star Trek episode should be, which is popping down for an away mission and hanging out and doing things, kind of getting into a little bit of trouble, and then having a really strong message at the end. I think this one also had that, but it was a little bit more for me. I don't know if that's just nostalgia goggles because it connects back to the TOS episode so well, but to me, If Memory Serves was the best episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. So, the worst episode, in my opinion, was Point of Light. Now, some of you may remember this episode. Some of you probably have blocked it out of your memory. This is the one where they reintroduced the Klingon subplot. And this is where we dealt with and figured out that Ash Tyler was hanging out in Kronos, and L'Rell is dealing with, different families and trying to maintain her position as Chancellor. And then we also get the uncovering plot of also, their albino son that came from, L'Rell and not to Kuvma's, but L'Rell and Spock's son. So we had that revelation there. Then we also had the subplot of interjecting the Section 31 stuff. Then we also had another subplot of interjecting the mystery surrounding what happened with Spock. We find out in this episode that he was at a psychiatric facility, and then he supposedly killed several people and then fled. And then, of course, Mama Spock was there, and she was hanging out, and it was just a lot. There was just too much stuff going on in this episode. I think the Klingon subplots, which I'll get into that kind of stuff later on in my returning character stuff, this Klingon subplot needed its own episode to really flesh out and really flourish into its own thing. The Section 31 stuff should have been its own episode, reintroducing, Empress Georgiou's character and the subplot of Section 31. And then the mystery and surrounding of Spock and the death of these people at the psychiatric facility should have also been its own episode. This was just too many plots inside of one episode, and ultimately it kind of fell flat. And I really do think that this episode fell victim to, I know that they did some pre-screeners before Season 2 came out, and then they reshot a couple of scenes and redid some episodes. I think that this actually was several different episodes, and then they just re-edited it all together into one giant episode, and ultimately it just felt bloated, kind of felt like a waste of time, and all the stories that were in there weren't really serviced correctly. So for me, that's the worst episode of Discovery Season 2. Okay, so now let's go on to my favorite scenes. This is not action scenes, this is just regular old scenes. So the best one, in my opinion, also comes from the best episode, in my opinion, which is If Memory Serves, and that was the scene between Anson Mount, and I believe her name was Melissa George, when she appears to him in a vision where he's standing inside of his ready room, and that's when he talks to Spock and Michael that are still on Talos 4.
We've spent a lifetime together.
I'm glad.
glad you're not alone.
All this time, you kept me sane. Kept me tethered to what I once felt. Even though I was never the person you thought I was.
You didn't deceive anyone, Vina. I felt it too. But you're here now.
This was a really fantastic sequence because we are obviously dealing with the emotions of that happened in the original TOS pilot. Then we also know that this is kind of the middle of the story that ends with the the menagerie inside of TOS as well, where he gets to go back to Talos 4 and live his life in that fantasy world where he's no longer crippled and in that wheelchair, and he gets to spend it with the women that he loves. So I love this sequence. Again, this may just be a nostalgia thing, I'm not sure, but I think Anson Mount's acting during this whole stuff, that whole sequence with them in the room was just fantastic. I really, really loved it. And it just made me, elevated the show and really made me invested. I was, already invested in Anson Mount's portrayal of Pike, but this one just knocked it right out of the park for me. I really, really loved it. Okay, and so for me, and I know some of you are going to disagree with this, the worst scene in Discovery Season 2 was Michael punching Leland in the face several times during the episode The Red Angels. So some of you may not remember, but the reason that she punches him in the face is because he discloses to her that her parents work for Section 31 and they are the ones that built the time suit. And it was his responsibility to get the time crystal, steal it from the Klingons, and return it to them so they could put it inside the suit. And then somehow the Klingons tracked the time crystal, got there, and then that's what, Burnham's whole backstory, where she thought her mom died. Her dad definitely did die, and then her mom was sent into the future, and then Michael was sent over to the Sarek Spock family. I did not like this sequence. And I mentioned this in my review of the episode, I didn't feel like Leland's character was portrayed as a bad guy that well. I actually felt very sympathetic for him because he seemed genuinely remorseful of the fact that her parents were affected because of his mistake. But he didn't force them into it. He didn't pressure them into getting the time crystal. They wanted the time crystal because they wanted, as he said in the episode, they wanted to prove that their Red Angel suit worked. So he was going to get the time crystal probably at the behest of them. And her taking it out on him, I understand is a very human thing to do. And is why is she, taking it out on him? Because, that's a very human thing to do. She's basically punching the messenger in this case. And she has no other outlet to kind of deal with this. So she takes it out on him. But to me, it just didn't fit right with Star Trek. And it didn't fit right with the ideals that Star Trek tries to lay on for, especially their Starfleet personnel, where she should have been able to accept the information. She shouldn't have resorted to physical violence. If she was pissed, she should have left the room, had that gym sequence with Spock, and then did a reconcile sequence with Leland later, saying, it's not your fault, which would have actually allowed the audience to connect with Leland and feel even more connection to him, so that when he later on gets, tortured, interrogated, and then later assimilated by the control nanobots that injected into his body, we would feel bad for his character even more than we did. So I feel like they really missed an opportunity there, and that's why, to me, this was the worst sequence inside of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. Okay, so for new characters, the best, I feel like, doesn't even really require a description, is Anson Mount playing Christopher Pike. I don't really feel like I need to describe this. I mean, the man was one of the heaviest lifters of this entire season. He's one of the things that people just absolutely loved, universally loved. He's acclaimed by everyone that I talked to online and in person. They love his portrayal of Pike, and they loved his character on the show. He brought some seriousness back to the show as the captain. He was just doing the right things. He was saying all the right things, and he was doing the right roles as a captain as opposed to Lorca. And again, nothing against Jason Isaacs. It has nothing to do with him or even the writing there, but his character was supposed to be bad. That was the whole point, but it didn't really fit well, and I don't think it worked as well as it should have. So having a regular old BA captain sit back in that chair and kind of lead this crew was something that we were sorely missing and was absolutely nailed by Anson Mount. So he just crushed it. To me, these secondaries, kind of like he's the top, and then right below that is obviously Ethan Peck and then Tig Notaro playing Jet Reno and Spock, respectively. They were very close to being the best. They were notable mentions in my opinion, but they didn't quite hit the same level as Anson Mount did, and that's probably just because we didn't spend as much time with them. But that's my best new character for Discovery Season 2. Okay, so the worst new character was probably Tilly's friend May. Honestly, I don't blame the actress at all. And the story surrounding her was okay, but to me, I don't know, like from episode to episode, it seemed to be kind of like shifting motivations. At first, it was kind of like, okay, is she like a friend? Then it was kind of she was like an enemy. And then it was like she was just needing them to do something inside the mycelial network. And I don't know, it just didn't really make any sense. I don't think it was, kind of laid out very clearly. I think it could have been done a lot better. And I think for that reason, her character kind of sunk, in my opinion. It didn't really land particularly well. We didn't get a whole lot of new characters this season, so it was hard to pick this, particular character. And again, this isn't even like the worst character ever. It's just, to me, didn't really work right, and I just didn't really like it. So for returning characters, the best, in my opinion, is Saru. Doug Jones is a beast. While other actors are having trouble dealing with all the makeup, this guy is a professional with the makeup stuff, and he shines through it. He knows exactly how to use it. He knows how to make all these different things happen. He knows how to really engross you into the characters. And ultimately, Saru's character had the most interesting arc throughout the season. He lost his ganglia, and he became like, not a badass, but kind of more brave and more bold and more forward with his kind of character. And he played it really, really well. One of the best, funniest lines inside of the entire show, in my opinion, up to this point, was when he was with Pike in the elevator.
The Starfleet manual offers no regulatory guidelines for interactions between humans with Klingons grafted to their bones and a ship's doctor returned from the dead.
His character was really well done this season. I think it really expanded on what they had done in the first season and really just created a nice long arc from season 1 to season 2. And I do hope that he sits in the captain's chair. I know they kind of left that kind of decision open at the end, but I don't want Michael to be there specifically because she needs to be in the action since she's the main character. She needs to be off the bridge, off doing things. You have Saru in the captain's chair, and that makes the most sense because he does a lot of good things with the crew and managing all of those team members on the ship. So I'm really excited to see what they do with Saru, but he was the best returning character in my opinion. Okay, so the worst returning character, and I know a lot of people are going to put Michael Burnham on this list, but for me, the worst returning character has to be Ash Tyler. I cannot stand his character and any of the stories and the plots surrounding him. And again, this is not the actor's fault. He's doing the best that he can with what they are giving him. And he does what he can, and I think he's gotten better from season 1 into season 2, kind of getting more used to the role. So he has actually improved from a actor's perspective, but all of the stories surrounding him were just the worst. I really do feel like they should have cut out Ash Tyler and L'Rell, and honestly, all of the Klingon stuff should have not been in season 2. It was ultimately really unnecessary, except for really at the end where they showed up with the Klingon cleave ship, which they could have easily just as done with more of those distance phone calls between Ash and Michael. Maybe they just never brought him on screen for a full episode, and then at the end she calls in a favor and he shows up with the big ships and they all, help out or whatever. I know the time crystals were also on Boreth, which was a Klingon planet, and had their son on there, but they could have put the time crystals anywhere. They didn't have to be on Boreth. It could have been on any planet. It could have been a whole new alien race that had the time crystals. There was nothing that was established previously in Trek that only time crystals existed on Boreth. They just chose to do that so they could kind of continue to bring back L'Rell and all of these Klingons that they spent all this money on, and all this makeup that they spent all this money on, so they wanted to continue to use that, but ultimately, I just hate his character. His character is the worst, and I don't know what they're going to do with him inside of Star Trek Discovery Season 3 because obviously he's still back in the TOS era. I think we're going to see him pop into the Section 31 show or possibly the Pike TOS show that they hopefully will start making at some point. We still haven't heard any official word yet, but I think if they do go that route, he'll probably make appearances there because he had a lot of interactions with Pike, and now he's the lead of Section 31, so it makes sense for him to be in that role. But ultimately, I think he was the worst returning character for Discovery. Okay, and the final category, which is action sequence. To me, the best action sequence of Discovery Season 2 was the opening salvo shot from Perpetual Infinity, the Discovery Season 2 finale. I really just loved that. I thought that was really, really cool. I thought that was a really well done action sequence. And really the whole fight, I still think is one of the best fights, if not the best fight, starship fight inside of Star Trek. I loved how well it was paced out. I loved how, big the ships were and they were moving very slow and that there was a lot of things breaking and they were fixing things and we were seeing all these different things happening on both of the ships. I thought it was really, really well executed, well edited, well directed. The action was just really great in that whole episode. But for me, that opening salvo shot was really just the top tier. And for me, the action sequence that was the worst, and this was hard to do because most of the action sequences in Discovery are very well done, just like the visuals. Both things are really well done, and the music, like all of those three things are usually really, really well done. Like those are the things that people complain the least about. So finding the worst action sequence was hard to do. So this one has a qualifier of just being kind of the most useless one, the one that we didn't really need the most. And for me, that was in these, episode 1, the premiere of season 2, which was the ships flying through the asteroid field to try and go get Tig Notaro's character, Jet Reno, off of her downed ship. Ultimately, we just didn't need it. I know they blew a lot of money on the budget to make these fun little action sequences of the ships dodging in and out. I know they wanted to enter into season 2 with a real big bang to have people excited about the season to come. But they could have just easily beamed down. The only thing that really happened in that was just that we lost a character that we just met that everybody hated anyways, which was that one dude with the blue uniform on whose name I already forgot. And he died, but that was really it. You kind of get a sense of the building of the groundwork of the friendship between Michael Burnham and Pike, but they could have done that in any other way. It didn't have to be this long, drawn-out asteroid flight sequence. So to me, that was the worst because it was the most useless one. We didn't really need it all that much. A few other things that I do want to note. Also, Ariam's death sequence where she's actually like talking and she's trying to, blow herself out of the airlock and all that stuff like that. I thought that was really well done. That kind of came in second for the best scene. But ultimately, I think that the Anson Mount scene that I selected was a little bit better. Another scene that I really enjoyed was all of the sequences of Michael Burnham actually using the Red Angel suit. It was very 2001: A Space Odyssey, where everything was going flat and all the wormhole was there. And I loved the way that looked. That was a really cool effect. I thought that they did a really great job with that. And again, that was kind of at the top of my list, and I was kind of going back and forth on that one being the best sequence. But because it was just a visuals and didn't really have too much to do with all the character stuff, I felt like it kind of lacked a little bit, and that's why the If Memory Serves, sequences up there as my best. But I did want to go ahead and note those things as really great as well. Another returning character that was kind of at the top of my best list was Culber, and I know some people may find that rather surprising. I feel like they shouldn't have killed him to begin with, and I think when they did that, they probably realized that they made a mistake, and they had to figure out a way to kind of get him back, and they kind of came up with this weird, convoluted way that he was stuck in the network, and then they pulled him back out of it. I thought his returning character was great. I thought the identity crisis that he was going through was a really well done thing. I thought that him and Paul Stamets' relationship and how it was affected after he got back was very real. They didn't just fall back in love or kind of use it as a subdued thing. Like, there were several lines there which clearly showed that he had moved out of their room. It had been several weeks since he had lived with him. They were on the rocks, and all these fun things were happening there. I really loved the fact that Culber kind of fought Ash Tyler.
Round 1, fight!
I thought that was a really well thought out idea because it makes sense. It's very human for him to react in that way. This is the guy that killed me. And he knows very well that it wasn't Vok. He knows that Ash Tyler and him are different people, but his human reaction kind of got the better of him. Similar to that of, the situation between Michael and Leyland, where the human reaction got the better of her. But to me, this one felt a little bit more authentic, and that's just my personal opinion. It just felt a little bit more real, a little bit more raw, and it just felt more like, in place. Like, it just made more sense for them two to fight as opposed to Michael and Leland to get into a fight. So I really like that as well. I thought his character coming back was a smart idea on their part, and I think he's a good actor, and I think he is really great on the team. So I'm glad that not only did he not stay on the Enterprise, but he made it back over to the Discovery, but he's also kind of gone through his arc, and he wants to reconcile with Stamets, and I can't wait to see how that unfolds with everybody in the future. Overall, my feelings of Discovery Season 2, I had to rate it, giving it an A through F grade. I'd probably put it at a C, maybe even a C-, but probably just a C. I think overall the storyline worked well. There's still several plot inconsistencies that I'm not clear on, like why all 7 red bursts appeared at the beginning of the season, if that didn't kind of correlate back to the way things were at the end of the season. They didn't really explain that at all. And ultimately, a few things kind of fell flat. There was a few episodes that were real stinkers, in my opinion. But overall, the season was really well done. I think it was a huge step up from Season 1, which most Star Trek, series go from one kind of rocky season to 2 kind of rocky seasons, and then 3 is where they really start to find their footing. You can look through all of the different Star Trek seasons and episodes and all that stuff like that to kind of correlate that. That doesn't give them an excuse for doing anything bad or poor, but, it's the reality. And the reality is that these shows take a little while to find their footing, and I really think that they're starting to really find their feet, which is why I give it a C rating. It was still messing up in some areas, but really listened to a lot of the fan feedback and started to improve upon it. And I think Season 3 is probably going to be in the B or even A- range, probably, because, essentially they're soft rebooting the show at this point, because they're going to be in the future. They have all of these characters that we know and kind of care about. I say kind of care about because we've only known them for a short period of time. but we know we kind of care about, and they're going to have this whole new, blank slate of plot that they can easily start doing whatever they want with. So I think that they have the potential to really elevate the show into something truly great, but we'll wait to see until we find out anything about that. Anyways, guys and gals, that wraps up my best and worst of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. I apologize for the long wait on this. Like I said, I got real busy, and then this thing kept kind of changing into its own different thing, and then I eventually figured out kind of how I wanted to do this video, and this is kind of where I've arrived at. So I'm curious to hear what all of you guys and gals think of it. These are the categories again: episode, scene, new character, returning character, and action sequence. So throw up your best and worst for these different categories down below in the comments, and let's get this conversation going, and also provide me feedback on what you think of my choices. I'm curious to hear what all of you guys and gals think about that. Anyways, I'll catch all of y'all next time. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!